Hello and welcome to Adoption Pop. We're a podcast journalist,
a filmmaker,
and a cultural critic burst pop culture's favorite adoption tropes.
Because we're adopted.
Since launching Adoption Pop in December 2025, we have been excited to hear from listeners, viewers, and subscribers who love the pod, including those who have provided recommendations for the media they would like us to cover. Today's pick is one such recommendation. Who picked this? Listeners Gretchen and Lora both said we have to cover Shondaland. This is our first time doing so, but it certainly will not be our last. The Grey's Anatomy spinoff, Private Practice, followed OB/GYN Addison Montgomery for 6 seasons from 2007 until 2013, where she and a who's who of middle-aged eye candy treated patients at an oceanside wellness center. The show's creator, Shonda Rhimes, is herself an adoptive mother who welcomed her second adopted daughter just 2 months before the show's Addison Montgomery delivers, then adopts baby Henry in the show. Today, we meet 8-month-old Henry in the season 6 episode entitled Apron Strings. Crystal, were you a Private Practice fan?
I was not a Private Practice fan. However, I was a Grey's Anatomy's fan, big Grey's Anatomy's fan, until it hit like COVID, and then I stopped watching it from that point forward. But I was also an Addison fan. So it took me back to my old Grey's Anatomy days watching that show. So
I think I'd only watched a couple of seasons of Grey's Anatomy, and that's in recent years because I was like, this show is still going? What is all the fuss about? And so I watched a couple of seasons and I'm like, I'm good. So it's still going today, right? Like it's, that's a lot of TV.
What, you didn't like McDreamy and McSteamy?
Sullivan, did you watch any Shondaland?
I did. I was a Grey's Anatomy early adopter. I remember watching the pilot episode. It was on at 9 p.m. on Sunday nights, and I used to watch it while I was ironing my shirts for the week. And I remember saying I was immediately hooked on the show, and remember saying to myself, I cannot invest in any more 9 p.m. TV shows because the alarm went off at 4:30 in the morning. And so a 9 p.m. TV show was a rough go, but Grey's was worth it. And so I don't remember how many of the early seasons I watched religiously, and then was also an Addison fan and also followed Addison to Private Practice. But at some point during Private Practice, and this was before the episode we got to, before the season 6 that we're talking about today, I fell off both Private Practice and Grey's at that time and never went back. So at this point, it had been, before watching for this discussion, it had been a very long time since I saw any episode of Grey's or Private Practice.
So, like, tell me more about being Addison fans. Like, give me her deal. Like, I not have a big connection to her.
Wasn't she with McDreamy at one point in time?
Yes, she was the ex-wife. I can tell you what it was for me immediately, though, Haley. She was beautiful. Kate Walsh was beautiful. How much else did you need to know at the time? Like, she was gorgeous. So who doesn't want to watch pretty people on TV?
Okay, and then, but in the spinoff, Private Practice, so she's a doctor, and what's the deal with the spinoff? Like, what is Private Practice about? Because in this episode, it really follows Addison, and we do see a couple of other people, but it's like focused in on her storyline for the most part, and I didn't really get it. Like, I mean, I get it, but like, she's still a doctor, and then there's this other place. I'm not sure.
Yes, so Grey's Anatomy had been set in Seattle, and followed a group of doctors in Seattle. You don't need to know any more than that, but followed a group of doctors in Seattle, of which Addison was the ex-wife of one of the main doctors, colloquially known as McDreamy or McSteamy. Which one was?
I think
Patrick
he
Dempsey.
was McDreamy. Patrick Dempsey was
So he was
McDreamy, and then the other guy was
and
McSteamy.
Eric. We'll put it in the show notes. Was McSteamy. Anyway, she was McDreamy's ex-wife. She shows up, I think, as a character. She wound up being very popular as a character, and at some point she gets a spin-off. And so Addison, the character, decides to move back to Southern California from Seattle. And so she goes back to Southern California and joins this private practice with a group of other wellness professionals. She is an OBGYN and a neonatal surgeon, but also joins other doctors, psychologists that form this private practice that really is around, it's not a fertility clinic the way we think about a fertility clinic today, but they deal very much in women and babies.
Okay, so that's like the hospital time and then the clinic time. I get it. I get it. Thank you. So we see in this opening that Addison becomes a mom. Do one of you want to like recap what we see in that? I know, Sullivan, you watched a little bit of the other episode that this happens in. Do you want to tell us about that? What happens at the beginning?
Sure. So what we see in flashback that happened in an earlier episode is Addison gets called in to deliver a baby, and she delivers the baby. It is a normal birth, and then she leaves. That's all we see of this particular delivery. And then at the very end of this particular episode, it actually occurs back in season 5. She gets called by social services to say that, she had put her name on a list for a baby, and we got one. The famous, we got one. Hey, we got one. We got one. And Addison shows up to the hospital, goes to where she's told to go, to essentially the birthing room. And she's told by the social worker that this woman picked you. She saw you in the book. She picked you. And Addison walks in the door, and at that point in time learns that the birth mother is actually, she has delivered this baby earlier in the episode. She was unaware. Even at the time she was delivering the baby, she was unaware that this birthing mom, whose name is Judy, was intending adoption. She knows none of that at the time she's delivering the baby, but walks in afterward, and which Judy says, I knew it was you. Like I knew this was you. I knew it was you. And so you're going to be the mom now. So like that happens in season 5. And now we are 8 months later in season 6.
I wonder about the ethics of that. Like it's ostensibly a pick where the birth mom gets to choose from all of these different folks. And because Judy has had an interaction with Addison, she recognizes her from the photo book and picks her. It's interesting to me because I know many adoptees who we'll call gray market are adopted by medical professionals. And I've heard the stories. We maybe have one on this very recording. Like someone knows someone, the nurse, the doctor, the medical administrator, and there's a baby. Like that's how it happens. So anyway, just interesting. That's what
I did look,
about.
By the way, I did try to find, at least, I'm here in the US, so the American Medical Association. I did try to look through their ethical guidelines, and everything that I found said there is no rule on it. Like there's no black and white rule about it. However, there are huge ethical concerns. To your point, there are enormous ethical concerns involved. in a medical professional who then adopts an infant that they have delivered.
But isn't it a beautiful adoption story?
It warms the heart until they come back. So in this story, it's 8 months. We learned that this was an open adoption. So we should say that this was designed to be an adoption that would allow Judy, who's Henry's birth mother, to visit, photos, the whole 9 yards, but that she has chosen not to for 8 months. And suddenly she is back.
But we also see at the beginning of the episode where Addison is talking with the social worker and Judy, and she's saying, what are the common practices for open adoption? Because I really want Judy to be in Henry's life. This is really important to me. And the social worker says, oh, well, 3 pictures a week and a visit once a month. And it's Judy that says, oh, okay. And you see she's kind of apprehensive. Like it may be too painful for her to see Henry.
It's not just that, it's that this discussion is happening. Henry is already born. The decision's already made, and you're negotiating this post-adoption contract agreement. Like she has no power in this moment. She feels she has no power. She can't be like, oh, I want more than that. I want less than that. It's just like these grown-ups in the room, she's much younger, are going to tell me what's normal, what to do, and she's going to sign it. Watching this was so difficult for me. I am literally undertaking at this moment, I'm interviewing moms just like Judy who have had these moments. And I have a mom who literally couldn't open the emails. She couldn't open the email. She couldn't open the photos. She couldn't do any calls because of the pain of it. And I'm like, oh, that part, that felt very real.
Do you think the average viewer, though, like Crystal, you said, it's painful for Judy, which that's what I saw too. I couldn't help but wonder, though, if the average non-adopted viewer actually doesn't see pain, but rather disinterest.
100%. And I think it lends to the birth mother trope that they are the villain, kind of. It villainizes her in a way. And I felt this sort of push and pull of the writers trying to do that, but then trying to not do that throughout the episode, which was interesting. But to your point, Haley, I also think that we've talked a lot about, like, not on these episodes, about these things being decided prior to baby being born. And that's also dangerous because then that further sort of feels like a coercion for the mother. Like, oh, well, all of these arrangements have been made, so I owe it to these people to give them my baby. And so what would be the answer for a situation like this?
She should not be in the hospital room. Addison should not be in this hospital room. This discussion should not be with Addison. Judy and a separate representative, a non-interested part, she should have a lawyer that is Judy's representative, so Judy can speak freely about the level of contact that she would like. And it should be her ideas, not what do other people do. Sure, for ideas. If Judy says, what do other people do? Judy should have an opportunity to speak to a therapist who has experience with these things. Judy should be given an opportunity to speak with other mothers who have placed children for adoption. What worked well for you? I mean, the support that Judy is lacking, and she feels in this moment she has no agency. That this is really problematic, and I'm glad you brought that up. Lots of papers are signed ahead of time. Yes, it's true. They should not be.
So Addison is saying, okay, Judy wants to see him after 8 months. In fact, Judy does come back and see him after 8 months. They have this cordial conversation. Addison kind of says, you can see him whenever you want. And Judy says, how about tomorrow? Which the look on Addison's face says no. But what she says verbally is yes, kind of yes, of course. And then we flash to the hospital office, where now we have Addison and her colleagues who represent, again, a variety of different medical professions, from psychology, general wellness, MDs, and which we should also say that one of these people, who is also a doctor, is her boyfriend, is her partner, played by Benjamin Pratt.
Wasn't he on Law and Order?
He was on Law and Order. He was Detective Curtis on Law and Order, and he was once on my hall pass. So, but not anymore. But he was once. For sure on my hall pass.
Not anymore.
Not anymore. Yeah.
She doesn't need a hall pass anymore.
For anyone who this is not their first episode of Adoption Pop, probably knows I'm single, because Crystal has already told them that I'm single. So this is only for people who are new here.
Okay.
And now Crystal has told you too.
I'm just doing public service.
Okay, so there's a discussion, and these these doctors, her colleagues, are all discussing and debating Judy all of a sudden coming back into Henry's life. I want to read some of these off. I don't have like who's saying what. I'm just going to kind of read through this conversation from the transcript for you all. So she hasn't visited in 8 months, and now she wants to visit 2 days in a row. It's too much, and she knows it. Is Judy regretting her decision to put Henry up for adoption? I didn't get that impression. Well, maybe seeing that her child's well cared for will actually help her move on. The point of open adoption is not for the birth mother to move on. The point is to have the birth mother involved in the child's life, which can be a powerful thing. Adopted person, Cooper, says, it's a douchey thing. You don't give a kid up and then hang around confusing everybody. I mean, I can't imagine what that would have been like. Just because you can't imagine it doesn't mean that's an invalid choice. Is anybody else here adopted that they know of? No? Okay, then I get more say than any of you people, and I say it's douchey. Addison, move to Burbank, sell the house, disappear. Henry doesn't need this kind of confusion. Another person, Judy's presence could be beneficial to Henry. If he knows her, he won't have fantasies that his birth mother is a spy or a queen or a supermodel. Those sound like your fantasies. The point is, if we remove the element of mystery, Henry won't have any illusions that Judy would have made him a better life than the one he has now. What if the birth mother is a bad influence? Well, that's relatively rare. These women tend to be selfless, envisioning a future for their baby that they are unable to provide. They also tend to have goals that are incompatible with premature parenthood. Premature parenthood, is that a thing? It is now. The arrangement can be good for everyone involved, provided adequate boundaries are set. Oh, that can be tough, though. If Judy's around all the time, she might start weighing in on parenting decisions. It's not about weighing in on parenting decisions. It's about making sure that everyone in the adoption triad is... Okay, so like we get every perspective. You could have every take, every opinion, all of it. Thoughts on any of these points that were made.
As an adopted person, have your adopted parents, did they have this fear that your birth mother was going to come back and take you?
Okay, for me, I was in a closed adoption, so that was not a possibility. That my birth mother did not know who I was with, where I was. it would have been very difficult for her at the time to find me to contact. Like there was no way for her to do so. So that was not my experience.
I was also in a closed adoption, and it was absolutely a fear for my adoptive mother. And in fact, she took steps well into my adulthood to prevent my connecting with her or her connecting with me. Yeah.
I grew up with a irrational fear of being abducted. Like my mom talked to me all the time about stranger danger. We had a secret word. And I think looking back on it now, I think it had more to do with my birth mother coming back for me and her fear of my birth mother coming back than it really did to do with like actual child abduction. My adoptive mom said that there was like a waiting period, like 18 months or something like that, where my birth mother was allowed to come back and change her mind. And she told me over and over again that she would have taken off to Mexico or somewhere and taken me and not allowed that to happen. So
what do you think about that now?
It's really hard for me to be honest. On one hand, on my as being an adoptee and somebody who didn't get to grow up with my family and my culture and all of that, I think, okay, well, what if my birth mother did decide to change her mind and come back and get me? Then, you know, I would not have that sense of like disconnection and all of that. But then, like, as a mother raising their child, like if somebody tried to come and take my 18-month-old, I would have a big problem with that also. And I mean, it's a lose-lose situation, I think, for all involved.
Totally. And have put that on you as a child to hear some of those things. Like that was unfair, I think, of your adoptive mom to do that. I'm sorry you had to carry that weight.
Thank you.
Sylvan, do you have thoughts on that?
Well, I was reflecting on, in this episode, this variety of viewpoints, which, quite frankly, I think the writers did a really good job in this scene in showing, you know, all of these different viewpoints, all of these different. It was really a debate, I think, between, you know, these professional colleagues, and I really appreciated that because I thought it laid out quite concisely. These are all of the different considerations. What I did find particularly interesting is, as you said, Cooper is adopted. We, for listeners, amongst ourselves, pull back the curtain, amongst ourselves, we actually had a debate ourselves about how much we were going to go into Cooper's story. We decided to save that for another episode of Adoption Pop because Private Practice and Grey's Anatomy and Shondaland, again, will be a gift that keeps on giving. And we thought, rather than subject you to what would amount to be a 2-hour episode for 48 minutes of television, we were going to not go so deeply into Cooper's story. But what I found interesting in this scene is we have Cooper, we have baby Henry, who of course is too young to speak. There is another adoptee in the episode that we will talk about as well, that we never hear her voice, but we see her on screen. And so for 48 minutes of television with 3 adopted people in it, we only hear from one, and he's very happy and he wants no interaction with his biological family at all. And that's a choice. It's a choice in the writing. And so I thought that was something really interesting, because there are other adoptee points of view. And again, there are other adoptees in this episode, and they don't speak.
his choice as a closed adoption adoptee to prescribe what an open adoption adoptee would experience is troublesome, at least.
Of a whole different generation of hit for them from him as well, because I think we need to acknowledge generational differences and generational expectations, and how what we understand about science and psychology evolves generation to generation to generation as well.
Exactly. Am I a fan of Cooper's statements? No. Do I love adoptees? Yes, I do. Any other thoughts on this conversation? I agree, Sullivan. Like, I love that they brought in all these different viewpoints. These are all the viewpoints we are subjected to every single day. This debate is not new, and I think it's very representative of the culture at large. We go to another character who is Addison's mentor. So she's also a physician. She is elderly. She's come into the ER. She's a very accomplished physician. In fact, Addison only finds out that she is in the ER because these nurses are talking about, her name is Vivian's contributions to the medical field. So she's like this famous doctor. And so Addison and Vivian kind of reconnect. Addison tells Vivian she has a child. Vivian finds out Addison has a child. And in the way Addison describes Henry, she says something like, "Oh, yeah, I delivered him, but like, oh, but I adopted." Like, it's just a weird wording, like, to make sure we know that she was the OBGYN who delivered Henry, and she's not Henry's mother or biological mother. And I should say Henry is biracial. I think he's presenting very Black to me, and his birth mother is white. Sullivan, yes?
Why are you looking at me?
You're Black and white. You also are a biracial person.
My read was that Judy was a person of color. I thought perhaps Judy was biracial or perhaps Latina. That's how I read her with my eyes. And that, yes, Henry to me reads biracial Black, for sure.
So Vivian is seeing Addison with a Black baby. This is what I'm trying to describe. And ultimately, during their conversation, so Addison discloses that Henry is adopted, and Vivian shares with Addison at a later point that she also relinquished a child in 1954. So we have another birth mother character appearing to talk about what adoption was like for her. This episode has everything, just a little bit of everything for everyone.
It does have everything. And for Vivian, who relinquished a child in 1954, she was in a Catholic hospital. She talks about, she said, "I had a baby and they took her away," which was hard. She's never told anyone. It's the first time she's ever talking about it. And in fact, this would have put her in the center of what we refer to now as the baby scoop. So this was a very real period in other places outside of the United States for sure, but also in the United States. 1954 to 1973 was the baby scoop era. Approximately 4 million children were separated from their mothers, largely unwed mothers, for reasons of, this was also a time when, again, the term illegitimacy would have been common parlance, and illegitimacy also equated to a psychological deficit on the part of the woman. If you had sex outside of wedlock, if you got pregnant, there was something psychologically wrong with you, not to mention immoral. and therefore you are unfit to parent, regardless of any other circumstances.
And just to be clear, just only the woman has a psychological defect, not the father. Just
Obviously.
the woman. Yes. Yeah. Just saying it out loud,
Obviously.
just for folks who didn't know.
Vivian is in the hospital room with Addison and Henry's there. And Addison is talking about Henry's birth mother having come to visit. And Vivian says, oh, like the birth mother was allowed to see Henry? Like, wow. And this was just like a very, very foreign concept for her. And Addison's like, yeah, totally. Like we have an open adoption. Oh, they do that? And because Vivian was never allowed to even hold her daughter, even though she had been promised that she would have 30 minutes with her. But Vivian's mother stepped in and prevented that from happening. And the cruelty of that. Ugh.
Can you picture that? So there were so many women who were prevented from holding their babies in the baby scoop era. So many never got to see their babies. Some of them were medicated, drugged, so they and were not even aware of labor happening. And so they went into the, hospital pregnant and went out never having seen their child. Okay. And this promise of 30 minutes, Crystal, you have 3 children you gave birth to. We've talked about our hospital experiences, which is a tale for another day. Can you imagine like 30 minutes with a newborn? Even that. And Vivian didn't get that, like that promise. Like,
no, I'm actually getting choked up right now. Just the thought of that. Yeah, I can't imagine that.
Yeah. And it's a forever goodbye for Vivian, in her mind. Like she shares, like she was thinking, like, what am I going to say to my, we have to know all we're going to know about each other in those 30 minutes. And Vivian's mom prevented her from having that.
Before we get to Judy's second visit the next day with Henry, Haley, I would love for you to talk about this open versus closed adoption thing, that it's not spelled out in this episode, but it's implied in the background, which is we've now got really 3 generations. We have Vivian, who was forced to relinquish her child at a time when she was not allowed to know anything. This was baby scoop era. And then, roughly 20 years later, Cooper is, about my age. He probably likely was born in the 70s. Also a closed adoption. And then we have Judy giving birth, 20 years after that, in an open adoption. Can you talk a little bit, based on your experience and your work, kind of the thinking around those things?
So to my knowledge, closed adoption means both parties, so the biological parents and the adoptive parents, are not known to each other. So they don't know each other's identities, names, those kinds of things. And then an open adoption technically only means that the parties are known to each other. So the adoptive parents have the biological parents' names and vice versa. And then with the introduction of open adoption, the idea was perhaps if we allow mothers to know where their children are and to have some type of contact, that it would be positive for both the mothers and for the adopted person to not have these wonderings. As someone in the little debate mentioned, they don't have to wonder if it's, you're a long lost princess or something like that. And open adoption really means it is a spectrum. Like you can, I have one mom that I'm talking to who knows where her child is. She knows the identity of his adoptive parents, and they have zero contact beyond that. I have a mom that literally gets that 1 year visit, 1 year visit and photos every once in a while. We have some moms who are still in touch and also in a semi-parenting role. Like, open adoption can mean just a huge variety of things. And I just want to point out the title of this episode is Apron Strings. And, like, to me that implies, a child is tugging at their mom's apron strings. And so you have this phrase of like, cut the apron strings. It's like, now you're independent and you're all grown up and you can go off on your own. So, what were the writers thinking naming this episode Apron Strings and showing all these different types of adoption and like the adoptive mom? Addison is the main character in this story, right? It's her show. Like, I get that. Yeah, I'm gonna throw back to you, Sullivan, to talk about Apron Strings if you have any thoughts on that.
I think of all the things they could have titled this episode, because when I hear apron strings, I actually don't hear tugging at. I hear cutting at the apron strings. Like, that's that's where my head goes immediately, cutting the apron strings. So it's a severing, right? It's a severing of a relationship, and there's a couple of ways. There's a couple of lenses to view this episode through, right? Like, you can view the episode through these adoptees, these three adoptees, Henry, Cooper, and Vivian's daughter, all of whom have been separated and certainly physically separated at birth. And also, when we open the episode, we know that Henry has not seen his mother, his biological mother, in 8 months. So there's that point of view around the severing and the separation. There is also from the adoptive mom's point of view, of which we have just one in the episode, Addison. But to your point, Haley, this is her show. Like, the show is literally created for her. In fact, there are multiple times in the episode where the self-centeredness is pretty shocking. I found myself wondering, why did I ever like this woman? And I think it's because she's pretty. But just incredibly self-centered, and so much so that her partner, who they appear to be in this sort of loving relationship, her partner who loves her very much, says as much to her more than once about her kind of self-centeredness in all of this. And, that's the adoptive mom we see on screen, but there is an adoptive mom in the background as well. And that is creator-producer Shonda Rhimes, who adopted her first child in 2002 and adopted a second 2 months before this episode aired, and went on to have a third through surrogacy. So this point of view of the adoptive mother, I would argue, is baked into the episode and invisible, unlike Addison's point of view, who engages in a very open debate with other characters about what she feels and what somebody else thinks. But we have this underlying, hand of the showrunner that you don't see at all visibly.
When I think about open adoption and this show and the way Addison reacts in some of these scenes, I think in theory, open adoption is good. But if I am really honest about whether or not it would work in my situation, there's not a hope in hell that it would have. as an adoptee who went into reunion at 17, it was impossible to be in the same room with my adoptive mother and my first mother. There was so much animosity between the two of them. There was so much competitiveness between the two of them. And I felt so caught in the middle. And it was one of the most uncomfortable relationships I think I've ever been in, that sort of threesome. And then as an adoptee who'd wondered who my mother was my entire life, I think, oh, that would have solved all my problems, that if I just knew what she looked like or knew who she was, but it would have come with a whole other stream of issues. And I know it would have. And I don't see my adoptive mom having the emotional maturity and self-assurance to be able to participate in an open adoption.
Oh, thank you for sharing that, Crystal. To your point of perhaps there's some bumps along the way in open adoption, we see day 2 where Judy goes to see Henry again, and they meet Addison and Henry at the park, and Judy's mom is along, and that is a surprise to Addison and her partner, and her partner says so. And this is interesting to me. This is another reason I brought up the biracial identity of Henry, because Judy says basically that her and her mom were not in touch when she got pregnant with Henry, because her mom really didn't like her boyfriend at the time. And so that strain caused a brief estrangement. And her mom identifies herself as Henry's grandma, which she is. She is Henry's grandma. And Addison is bristling at all of this. And I just to be fair, this did feel ambushy to me. It felt inappropriate. They should have disclosed. And there's just this real tension all the way around. And Judy's mom is having a hard time.
And Addison is also having a hard time, because when she and her partner and baby Henry return back home, we see Addison, for whom this is coming to a head, and starts saying things about wanting to take Henry, wanting to run away with him. She tells Judy at their next meeting. Judy comes to see her. Addison doesn't know why, but she's surprised by this visit from Judy again. and she says to Judy, "You can't do this. I will pack up and move. I will take him in the middle of the night and you will never see us again." We should just say, as Haley talked about open adoption agreements, these are not enforceable by law. And mothers are not told this. Birth mothers, first mothers, are not told this. But these agreements are not enforceable. And so we see open adoption agreements get more narrow, close altogether over the course of children's lives at the unilateral decision of adoptive parents.
Addison says in her tizzy, she says, "I would do anything for my boy." And she lists off all of these things, right? Yes, taking him away, cutting off a limb. And I thought, but would you give him back to his biological mother to parent if she was in a state to do so now? the temporary crisis has been alleviated and she's got a job now, her mom's back in her life, could perhaps help with parenting support. Would you do that? I don't think so.
Is that a fair thing to ask?
I don't know. Would you do anything for your child? Would you let them reintegrate with their biological family at 8 months old, where there would still be separation trauma, but I think a lot of things would be alleviated. Would that ever happen? Never in a million years. But don't say you would do absolutely anything for your baby. That's not true. That's not true.
And I think also we see every state is different, but there's also, I think, a reason why in most states, there is a period of revocation in whatever the agreement was. There's a period before the adoption is finalized. And I think the period is there before the adoption is finalized because there is a recognition that long term, the child is better off with biological parents. Now, I understand there are people who, for a litany of reasons, are not capable of raising children. I get that. And so I don't want listeners to come back and be like, but not always. No, I got it. I understand. I am talking about, though, like what psychologists and science tells us, that assuming physical safety and, and those kinds of things, that the biological parent is the better option. And we have laws like the revocation periods, waiting periods, foster programs that are really truly designed for reunification, things like ICWA, that protects Indigenous children from being removed from Indigenous communities and placed with non-Indigenous families. Like, all of these laws are in place that are constantly under threat by the adoption industry, which, again, we've said this before on the pod, but it's a $25 billion industry. And so there is money to be made when children are adopted. That's who's fighting against these things. That's who's fighting in favor of reduced periods, reduced points in time when parents lose their parental rights for whatever reason. Like, that's who's fighting. The money makers are who's fighting this. But I think that the science tells us that, again, assuming safety, that children are better off with their biological parents.
Let's go to Vivian, and she shares more with Addison about her relinquishing of her daughter, and we hear something. She's talking about her accomplishments as a physician and her drive, and she was now single-minded, like, okay, my child is placed with someone else, I'm going to be the best fucking doctor there ever was. And she said, after your mother calls you a whore, nothing else hurts. Just, again, it's a nod to that baby scoop era. Like, so many women experience that. So I'm glad that was highlighted. And Vivian is dying. She has cancer. She knew this going into the ER. It's just the cancer spread. And she asks Addison to please write down, in nice penmanship, not Dr. Scribbles, a letter to the daughter that she relinquished for adoption. Did anyone have big feelings during these scenes?
I wish I could have got a letter.
I'm so triggered by so many things in this episode, but the biggest one for me is the letter. My birth mother wrote me a letter when I was 10 days old in the hospital. it was probably the most honest thing she's ever said to me. It's the most honest thing I've ever received from her. And I received it while my adoptive mother was in a fit of rage, when I had made some sort of comment or questioning, where did I come from? Who's my birth mother? And she went into her closet and in an old shoebox brought out this letter and threw it at me. And I opened it up. It was the most beautiful letter I'd ever read in my life. And I kept that letter and I read it 1,000 times. And then when I met my first mother, I brought the letter because I wanted to show it to her and I wanted to tell her how much it meant to me. And she took it and she wouldn't give it back to me.
I have an email from my first mother, and like I haven't read it for a long time, but that was like the best thing I ever got from her. And so like watching the scene, it's a very good letter. It's a good letter. I wish she had a letter, Sullivan. Crystal, I wish she had that letter back. Like, we get nothing. Like, we get nothing. We don't know where we come from. We get nothing. So to have these things, like, it's so precious. And it's really significant. It's really significant. We have 2 scenes to get to. I'm going to start with Addison, after taking this letter down for Vivian. Vivian dies, but Addison promises she is going to deliver this letter. And in between, we see Addison interrupts Judy at her place of work, which Addison was real fussed about, but I guess it's okay now. It's okay for her to do, but not for Judy to do. Just saying. And
good point.
So Judy is a server at a diner, and Addison brings her a gift and basically is like, listen, like, sorry I said those things. We really do want you in Henry's life. You're a part of our family. Here's this gift, and is trying to make amends. Any comments on that scene?
I think the only thing that really I rubbed me the wrong way, though I appreciate Addison's intent, is she gives Judy this gift and she says, I can't give you anything compared to what you gave me. And I think that just, again, I understand the intent. And, you know, as you both know, I never met my birth mother. She was passed already when I found her. You know, at one point, my adoptive mother said, this is before I knew that she had passed. And she said, I want to search with you because I want to meet this woman and thank her for the gift that she gave me. And in that language, again, I understand it comes from a good place. For me, it curdles my stomach because I'm not an object to be gifted from one person to another. And it's a huge problem for me as a human, also as a Black American, to be exchanged, you know, to be given to white people in exchange for money, for me, touches on a legacy here in the United States. And I know when I say those kinds of things, because I have said them in other forums, it makes people extremely uncomfortable. for me to draw those kinds of parallels. But I think that those parallels need to be considered. And so here you have Addison. She does not say the word gift. But for me, that's essentially like that's what I feel in my body when she tells Judy, I can't give you anything compared to what you gave me. So she gives her a necklace, I think. So here's a necklace.
Yeah, Sullivan, I really appreciate you drawing those parallels because I think it really speaks to how much we allow to stay in our periphery or completely out of our minds when it comes to adoption. There's so much that we're willing to ignore, that society is willing to ignore. And so I think keep saying it. it needs to be said personally from my opinion.
Our last scene we're going to address, and then I have an award to present, is Addison flies to meet Vivian's daughter and present her with a letter. Sullivan mentioned earlier, this is the other adoptee in the episode. We don't hear a peep from her. She looks middle-aged, and Addison basically reports to her partner, like, yeah, it went great. She did great. She's got all this family and all these kids, kind of like it all worked out. It all worked out for all these adoptees, all these happy adoptees. Check, check, check. That's all good. Any thoughts on that before I present my award?
Well, yeah, that's what Hollywood wants to do. They want to button it up, put a little bow on it, and it just grates on my nerves, you guys. It grates on my nerves.
Well, I hope this doesn't grate on your nerves, Crystal. But Shonda Land's Apron strings correctly notes the pain of separation, but fails to diagnose the underlying condition. These people are doctors. What are they doing? The episode documents anxieties, long-held grief, relational strain, but treats them as isolated symptoms rather than evidence of a systemic problem. Instead of asking whether adoption was necessary for Judy, viewers are asked to placate the feelings of the adoptive mother, Addison. Instead of asking whether a forced adoption was cruel and traumatic, viewers are asked to praise Vivian for her narrow focus on medical success. Instead of asking truly, how do the adopted people fare as a result of these examples of adoption, we're shown positive outcomes all around. The adoptee Coop says, nobody gives up a child unless they're in crisis. And Coop also says, blood doesn't make a family, love does. Thanks, writers. For recognizing distress, running multiple tests, and still failing to see the cure as family preservation, I'm awarding Apron Strings the Differential Diagnosis Failure Award. Adoption Pop is podcast journalist Haley Radke,
filmmaker Crystal Park,
and cultural critic Sullivan Summer. In researching this episode, we relied on the Call Her Daddy podcast with Shonda Rhimes, O Magazine, Oprah Talks to Shonda Rhimes, Ricky Solinger, Wake Up Little Susie, Single Pregnancy and Race Before Roe v. Wade, Ann Fessler, The Girls Who Went Away, and Gretchen Sisson, Relinquished, The Politics of Adoption and the Privilege of American Motherhood.
If you like what we do, drop us a rating on your podcast app, find and follow us on Instagram and TikTok, and let us know what you want us to cover in future episodes.
Join us next week when we take one of HBO's most compelling drama series to task on Adoption Pop.